Well, well. Gather close, my lightning in human form outliers, my beautifully unmanageable anomalies, my rare breed of troublemakers who treat rules like suggestions written in pencil. You've stepped into the kind of stage where reputations are minted or destroyed in a heartbeat. And today, we're dissecting that heartbeat. The one where your speech detonated in the courtroom, and the judge, the one everyone swore was untouchable, found his jaw betraying him before he could remember how to hold it shut. They thought they had you mapped. They thought they knew your type, confident enough to stand, but still safely confined within their little mental boxes. You didn't break those boxes, you vaporized them. And the beauty was, you didn't arrive to prove yourself. You arrived like you had already won, like the outcome was a formality, like you were there to give them the courtesy of witnessing the inevitable. From the moment you rose, the air shifted, not in that cinematic, slow-motion way. No, it was subtler and far more dangerous. It was the tightening of spines, the sudden stillness in movements, the kind of instinctive pause humans get when they sense something they can't immediately measure. Your eyes weren't pleading, your tone wasn't fishing for validation. You stood there like the verdict was something you might hand down to them. The judge noticed before anyone else. That's why the moment is burned into his nervous system. His training told him to evaluate arguments. But you weren't delivering an argument. You were delivering impact. And impact has a way of bypassing intellect and punching straight into the core. That's why his expression cracked before his reasoning could even catch up. That's why his jaw dropped. You didn't speak like someone on trial. You spoke like someone summoning the room to attention. Your words didn't crawl out cautiously. They struck. The first sentence hit like a meteor slamming into a quiet landscape, vaporizing comfort zones on impact. It was the force of inevitability wrapped in syllables. Every point you made didn't just land, it lodged. The courtroom was used to speeches built like ladders, step by predictable step. Yours was a different architecture entirely. You built an earthquake. You rearranged the ground they were standing on while they were still deciding whether to listen. And here's the secret that made it work. You weren't trying to convince. You were making them remember. See, convincing appeals to logic. Memory, though? Memory is burned into the flesh by moments that feel undeniable. And you gave them that. Not a lecture, not a debate. A moment. That's why the judge's face betrayed him. He'd been trained to absorb information without reaction, but his body recognized you as something outside the template. It's hard to hide when every instinct is telling you, this changes the order of things. You understood timing in a way most speakers never will. You didn't rush to stack point after point. You let them breathe, only so they'd choke a little on what you'd just said. You let the echoes of your words expand in their heads until they weren't sure if the next silence was yours or theirs. That's the warfare no one teaches, the psychological chokehold that makes your audience sit in their own discomfort. And the way you moved, it wasn't performance, it was precision. Every shift of your gaze was deliberate. Every turn of your body recalibrated the room's energy. You weren't pacing. You were drawing a map they didn't know they were following until they were already at the destination you'd chosen. That's why they couldn't look away. That's why even those ready to dismiss you found themselves leaning forward. Your delivery was surgical. Not a single wasted word. Not a single filler breath. And yet it didn't feel mechanical. It felt alive. It felt dangerous because deep down, they all knew. You were speaking from somewhere most people never dare to go. Not a place of hope, not a place of anger, a place of certainty. And certainty, in its pure form, is terrifying. The judge. He tried to recover, tried to settle his expression back into neutrality. But by then it was too late. The jaw drop had happened, and everyone who caught it knew they'd just witnessed the unmasking of a man who thought he'd seen it all. You exposed him without calling his name. You made him part of your story without his consent. That's the kind of dominance you can't undo. You see, when you deliver a meteor, you don't aim to win the moment. You aim to alter the landscape so completely that they can never return to the version of themselves they were before they heard you. And in that courtroom, you weren't just altering the judge, you were altering everyone. The opposing counsel, the spectators, even the stenographer who was supposed to remain a machine. You infected them all. And here's the dangerous part. You didn't peak too soon. Most people deliver their strongest point first, trying to grab attention. You built tension like a blade being sharpened in the dark. They didn't realize the weight of what they were hearing until they felt the floor drop from under them. And once they realized, they couldn't stop it. That's why jaws drop. Not because of shock alone, but because the mind suddenly understands it's dealing with something that can't be ignored. It's a surrender, even if they try to hide it. And the judges drop. It was the most expensive form of surrender in that room. It told everyone else that whether they admitted it or not, they'd felt the same strike. You didn't need to pound the table. You were the table. You didn't need to raise your voice. You were the volume they couldn't escape. And as each sentence stacked, not neatly, but like a wall pressing closer, you could see it in their eyes, that microsecond where resistance became awe-we. And the more they felt it, the more they tried to look composed. That's how you knew you had them. The real tells aren't gasps or applause. They're the unnatural stillness, the avoidance of eye contact, the slight stiffening of posture when someone realizes they're inside another person's gravity. You owned that gravity. Now most would stop here and call it victory. But you understood that the first impact is just the beginning. A meteor doesn't destroy everything in the moment it hits. The shockwave, the dust, the aftershocks, that's where the real devastation lies. And in that courtroom, you were already crafting your aftershocks. Every pause was a fault line. Every pivot in your argument was a new fracture in their mental ground. You didn't let them escape to the safety of thinking they understood you. You kept shifting, kept pulling them off balance, kept ensuring that when the dust settled, they'd be standing somewhere entirely different than where they'd begun. The judge knew it. He might not have admitted it, but his hands betrayed him. The way his fingers tightened around the armrest, the way his notes became more like scratches than structured sentences. He wasn't just recording facts, he was holding on. And holding on, in a place like that, is the first sign you're losing control. You didn't rush the close. You let it bleed into them, because you knew the real weapon isn't the sentence you end with. It's the one they can't stop replaying after you sit down. That's how you haunt them. That's how you turn a single speech into a permanent presence in their minds. And so as you reached the final words of your opening, you didn't slow down for drama. You didn't beg for applause. You dropped the last line like a stone into deep water, clean, heavy, irreversible. And you could see it in their faces, even in the judge's still recovering jaw. They knew they weren't getting the old reality back. But here's the thing. When you step into that next move, you're not just speaking anymore. You're dragging the entire room into your gravitational pull. It's no longer a court, no longer a hearing, no longer a simple moment in time. It becomes a stage, and every single person inside becomes an audience member chained to their seat. They're not looking at papers anymore. They're not glancing at their watches. Even the judge, stone-faced, untouchable, has forgotten the script. That's when you realize something beautiful. The silence between your words is just as loud as your words themselves. Every pause you take is like holding the world on the edge of a cliff, making them wonder if the next step will be solid ground or the drop. And you start leaning into it. Your tone changes, not in volume, but in weight. You hit them with sentences that land like lead bricks, then follow with whispers sharp enough to cut glass. The judge's pen stops moving, frozen mid-air, as if afraid to miss a single syllable. The defense glances sideways, trying to read the room, but there's nothing to read. Because the room is no longer theirs, you've taken it, and you've locked the doors. See, a speech like this isn't just about facts. It's not just about what happened. It's about building a truth so undeniable that even the ones who want to fight it start feeling stupid for trying. It's about forcing them to see themselves in the story, whether they want to or not. And you. Oh, you've mastered the art of building the trap and then letting them walk right into it. You weave it with precision, every example you give, laced with the kind of detail that makes them feel the moment, not just imagine it. You don't tell them the rain was heavy. You make them hear the rain pounding against the windows in their mind. The judge shifts in their seat. That's the first crack. Most people wouldn't notice it, but you do. They're leaning forward just a little, not to intimidate you, but because they can't help it. Your words aren't just being heard, they're being absorbed. You can see it in their eyes. That subtle, unspoken, this is different. And when you see it, you push harder. You strip away the excess. You cut through every ounce of fluff and dead weight, and every sentence becomes a blade. You don't raise your voice. You sharpen it. You drop a truth so raw that it doesn't even sound like argument anymore. It sounds like reality itself is speaking through you. And that's when the room shifts again. The lawyers, the jury, the audience, they're no longer spectators. They're witnesses, not witnesses to a case, but to a moment they'll never forget. And then you pivot. Not in a rush, not in a stumble, but like you've been planning it all along. You bring up the one fact, the one piece of the puzzle they didn't see coming. It's not the loudest fact. It's not the biggest. But it's the one that connects everything. The meteor you've been dropping. This is the molten core. And when you reveal it, you don't just say it. You let it sit there, heavy, inevitable. The kind of truth that makes breathing feel like a confession. The judge doesn't move. They can't. Their jaw doesn't just metaphorically drop. It actually slackens. Their lips part slightly. Their posture dips for just a heartbeat. And that's when you know you've crossed the threshold. You've taken someone who has heard it all, someone whose profession is to remain unmoved, and you've made them forget their mask. That's not easy. That's not common. That's legendary. But you don't stop there. You press into it. You start stacking truths on top of each other, building a mountain they can't climb, can't ignore, can't discredit. And you don't rush to the top. You savor it. You let each sentence settle in their bones before dropping the next. You give them just enough time to think they've caught their balance, and then you hit them again. Now the room is different. It's not tense. It's suspended, like gravity's been dialed down, and everything is just hanging in the air, waiting for you to decide when to let it fall. You could end it right there and still walk away a victor, but you're not here for enough. You're here for the crater. You're here for the line that will echo in their heads for weeks, months, maybe years. So you reach deep, not for anger, not for theatrics, but for the pure, unfiltered truth that started all of this. And when you speak it, you strip away every wall, every defense. It's not just a closing argument. It's the emotional equivalent of standing in front of a mirror and making them look until they see everything they've been avoiding. And they do see it. You can tell. The judge's eyes narrow, not in skepticism, but in the slow, reluctant acknowledgement that they're witnessing something that can't be unseen. Then comes the moment you've been waiting for, the line, the one you've been building toward without them realizing it. The one sentence that doesn't just close your case, it seals it shut forever. You say it, and the silence afterward is deafening. No coughs, no shuffles, no papers, just the quiet hum of air conditioning and the sound of every heartbeat in the room sinking to yours. The judge blinks slowly, almost like they're coming back from somewhere far away. Their jaw clenches now, not to hide the drop from before, but because they've realized they just witnessed something monumental. They know that no matter what happens next, this moment will live in the bones of this courtroom forever. And you just stand there, still, calm, letting the weight of it linger. You don't need to smirk. You don't need to gloat. The victory isn't in what they say next. It's in the fact that they have to live with what you just gave them. And here's the secret most people will never understand. The real impact of a meteor isn't the explosion when it hits. It's the shift it causes in everything afterward. You didn't just win the room. You didn't just win the judge. You rewrote the very atmosphere they breathe in here. They'll try to carry on like normal, but every time they walk into this space, they'll feel it. That invisible scar in the air where you dropped your truth. When you finally walk back to your seat, the air moves differently. People avoid your eyes, not because they're against you, but because they're too aware of you now. Even the opposition doesn't look defiant anymore. They look careful, like they've just realized you're not someone they can box in, not someone they can predict. You're the meteor, and they're just living in the crater you left. And as for the judge, they'll compose themselves, eventually. They'll return to their script, their questions, their rulings. But somewhere, buried beneath all that professional armor, there will always be the memory of this day, the day their jaw dropped, the day their composure cracked, the day your words didn't just land, they reshaped the ground they stood on. That's the thing about moments like this. They don't fade. They live on in the minds of everyone who saw them. And when the verdict comes, because it will, it won't just be about the evidence or the law. It will be about the memory. The image of you standing there, speaking like the earth itself had handed you the mic, and the universe had leaned in to listen. And you'll know, without anyone having to say it, that this wasn't just a win. It was a mark burned so deep into the timeline that no one, judge, jury, or otherwise, will ever be able to erase it. Because when your speech hits like a meteor, it doesn't just end the argument, it changes the landscape forever. And now, silence. Not the kind that's comfortable, not the kind that comes when everyone's thinking the same thing, no. This is the kind of silence that roars, the kind where every second stretches into eternity, where the air feels heavier because it's carrying the weight of what just happened. You can almost hear the crack in the room, like the atmosphere itself just split open under the pressure of your words. The judge's hands tighten on the bench, not because they're holding back anger, not because they're hiding disbelief, but because they're grounding themselves in the reality that something irreversible has just taken place. That jaw, still hanging slightly open, isn't an accident. It's the involuntary response of someone who's just witnessed something they didn't prepare for, something they didn't even believe was possible in this room. Because in court, people expect arguments. They expect persuasion. They expect logic, evidence, and maybe even a clever turn of phrase. But what you just dropped, that wasn't an argument. That wasn't persuasion. That was an impact event. A collision so powerful that it rewrote the mental map of every single person sitting here. And the judge knows it. The jury knows it. The opposition knows it. Even the court reporter, usually a stoic, is typing just a little slower now, like they're afraid to miss the gravity of this moment. You didn't just win them over. You dismantled the ground they were standing on. You took every piece of certainty they clung to and smashed it to dust. They'll tell themselves they can rebuild. They'll pretend the foundations are still there. But deep down, they know. This landscape has changed forever. The old terrain is gone. What's left is something they'll have to learn to navigate all over again, and you'll always be the one who forced that shift. The thing about a meteor is, it doesn't just land, it explodes. The shockwave reaches far beyond the point of impact. And here, in this room, the shockwave is spreading. You can see it in the way the opposition shifts in their seats, like the fabric of their suits suddenly got tighter. You can hear it in the way the jury breathes, shallow and careful, as though they're afraid to disturb the aftershock. You can feel it in the way the judge's eyes keep darting, not to you, but to the space in front of you, as if the words still hang there, suspended, impossible to erase. This isn't about eloquence anymore. This isn't about who spoke better or who had the sharper point. This is about survival now. And they all know it. The side that came here thinking they could twist the truth is scrambling to reassemble their story, but it's like trying to glue a shattered mirror. The reflection will never be whole again. And that's the beauty of it. You didn't just win an argument. You made sure that the version of reality they were pushing will never, ever be believable again. And here's where it gets interesting. In most battles of words, the opponent still has room to maneuver. They can dodge, deflect, dance around the weak spots. But when a meteor hits, there's no dodging. There's no clever counter. There's only damage control. And the more they try to talk, the more obvious it becomes. They're not answering your points. They're answering their own fear. You stripped away the armor. You didn't just go for the head. You went for the structure holding the whole thing together. And now, they're exposed. The judge isn't immune either. That dropped jaw isn't just surprise. It's a confession. Without saying a word, that expression admits, I didn't expect this. I didn't see this coming. I didn't think anyone could do what you just did. That's the moment you know you've crossed into rare territory. Because in a courtroom, control is currency. The judge holds the gavel, the rules, the pace. But now, you're the gravitational center of the room. Every eye, every breath, every unspoken thought is orbiting you. It's not arrogance, it's physics. When something with enough force enters a space, it alters the pull on everything around it. And your speech. It wasn't just strong, it was undeniable. No amount of bias, favoritism, or pre-written decision can fully resist a blow that clean, that heavy, that final. They may still try to spin it later. They may still retreat to their chambers and rationalize a different angle. But the truth will follow them. The image of you standing there, words like molten fire, will follow them. The look on their own face will follow them. And the more they replay it in their minds, the deeper the crater gets. See, most people think the win happens when the decision is announced. But the real win, it happens here, in the silence, after the impact, in the way the opposition stares at the table instead of meeting your eyes, in the way the judge shifts, subtly, trying to reclaim some control but failing, because everyone has already seen it. The moment the jaw dropped, the balance of power shifted. They can write whatever they want in the final ruling. They can use all the right words to make it sound official. But the truth is already branded into the minds of everyone who mattered in this room. And the best part? You didn't even need theatrics, no raised voice, no pounding fists, no desperate appeals. You simply delivered truth in its purest, sharpest form, so precise it cut through every layer of doubt, so heavy it left no space for rebuttal. That's why it hit like a meteor, because meteors don't ask permission. They don't build suspense. They arrive without warning, and when they do, they don't leave room for negotiation. The opposition might recover someday. They might patch up their pride, tell themselves stories about how it wasn't as bad as it felt. But that's just survival instinct. They'll never forget what it felt like in this moment, sitting under the weight of your words, watching the judge, their supposed neutral ground, sit stunned, speechless, and visibly shaken. And you'll walk out knowing something they never will, that this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about shifting the ground beneath their feet so that even if they stand again, they'll always feel its sway. It was about setting a standard so high that every word they speak from now on will be measured against the meteor they just witnessed. The court will move on. Another case will be called. The sound of the gavel will return. But there's a reason people still talk about the biggest impact events in history centuries later. They leave traces. This room now has a trace of you. This bench has a trace of you. That judge, whether they like it or not, has a trace of you in the way they'll hesitate before underestimating someone again. And long after the paperwork is filed, long after the verdict is officially recorded, there will be whispers. Do you remember that one? The one where the judge froze? Yeah, that was the one with, and your name will finish that sentence. Not because you asked for it, not because you chased it, but because once a meteor lands, its story doesn't need to be told. It tells itself. So you walk out, not just with a win, but with the knowledge that you've done something irreversible. You've proven that even in the most controlled, rigid, rule-bound space, force still matters. Truth still matters. And when you deliver it with precision and weight, it can shake the walls. The jaw dropped. The silence stretched. The crater remains. And from this day forward, anyone who steps into a room with you will have that image in the back of their mind. The moment you turned words into an impact so devastating, it didn't just win the case. It rewrote the rules of the game.